Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
And welcome to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us for this live show.
Two in a row.
And I don't know, maybe it's just easier we do it live because then you can hear all the F-ups and screw-ups and all, and you can hear the dog walking through the house sometimes. But we're not here to talk about the dog in my house, even though Hannah would love to do that. Though he kind of likes Trump, so we might get into some Trump tonight if he didn't get enough from the debate last week.
I don't think so. I think we got enough of it. We're going to be talking about maybe a little bit of the vice presidential debate that's going to be happening. I think it starts at 9 tonight, so in about an hour there's going to be some of that action going on. So what the fight for them for viewership. But I really don't think Pence and Kaine are going to be doing anything crazy. So the next presidential debate will be where it's at. But I think we talked enough about that last one.
I don't know. Do you want to do another episode where we talk about the presidential debate next week?
I think it'd be fun, but we need to know what everyone else thinks. Does anyone else want to hear us talk about that? Or they want to hear me drone on about the science of electrons and quantum computing?
Well, we don't like to hear you drone on, but if you have intelligent points to meet, we're all for that. But we'll think about it. So send your emails to cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Go ahead and tweet at us at cellardoorskep and tell us what you think. Do you want to hear more debate, or is it just going to be the same old, same old? But before we get into that, there was an interesting, I sent this tweet out last night. There's a report going around where you can actually go and vote on what you think Donald Trump should talk about. It's amazing, and I don't know if you saw that, Hannah, because we share Twitter and all, but you should go look at that, because you could go through, I think, 36 questions, and you could say, yeah, I think you should talk about this. No, I think you shouldn't. I don't like this. And then you can give your own opinions as well. And I won't tell you there's certain things I told Trump I want to hear him talk about more.
I think that's a horrible idea for him to put that out there, because anytime there's ever an option for something to be named on the internet, it always turns into like Bodie McBoatface or Spongy McSpongeface. So, Trump, could you please talk about Trumpy McTrumpface for an hour? Because that's all we're really interested in.
But anyway, so send us your opinions. Let us know, hey, do you want to hear us talk about the debate? But tonight, we're not going to do that. We're not going to talk about the debate. We have a couple great segments lined up. We're going to talk about the loss of the workers' American dream. A good segment Hammett has put together. Hammett, you're a Hammett now, has put together for us.
I am a tattoo on your hands.
and it's basically, we want to talk about the economy doing well and unemployment being down, but why? What kind of employment is up, and is it something that we should be supporting? And yes, this is going to be very critical of the last administration, because that's kind of part of where this fits. We're also going to interview Robert Ray, the founder of the original Motto movement. And he's got a great website and a great movement where he's trying to get Pluribus Unum put back on the money and on the walls of the courts as well. We also we're going to talk a little bit about quantum computing, some new innovations, and we're going to round the whole show out by talking about socialism and a little place called Auroville, India. And this article was written by Slate, and I'll be honest, it's not a very favorable article for socialism, but I wanted to tackle it anyway to see how fair it was going to be, to see if there was any merits to their arguments, and then kind of look at what that society, that utopia, wants to be. Without further ado, though, we're going to let Hannah kick off the show tonight, because I always talk so much. But we didn't do our shot, did we? We never did our shot when we...
I was holding on to it. I was waiting for it. When do we get
All
this
right,
started,
we're going to do the shot right now. So, folks, this shot is brought to you by Paleo Radio and their neoconservative economics. Without further ado, though, in all seriousness, folks, please join us as we talk about the loss of the workers' American dream. And so, Hannah, tell us a little bit about why you thought this should be the opening segment for tonight's show.
Well, I was browsing, as these events usually start, just looking for things, absorbing everything out there in the interwebs, intersphere, and I saw something that said that the United States lost 14,000 manufacturing jobs in the month of August. And as a manufacturer and an engineer and a blue collar and a maker, I don't know if you're familiar with the maker movement, but I mean,
is it Maker's Mark movement?
No, that's probably a smaller but more fun movement. The maker movement is just basically getting people back to skilled trades and making things and doing things for yourself, as opposed to just consuming from other countries and other people's products and stuff. And I'm one of those people. I would much rather make jewelry for my wife when it comes to the holidays. I would much rather make things for friends and family. I've been doing most of my house stuff just by hand because I think it's better than spending my hard-earned money hiring other people out when it's something that I want to learn how to do and all that kind of stuff. Well, this type of stuff, this by hands thing, is something that's been dwindling in this country. And we've been hearing that our economy is doing great. We've been hearing that things are better. Things are growing. We're getting back to our pre-Great Recession work and job levels. Unemployment is back just under 5%. And I saw that we've lost this massive number of economic and manufacturing jobs. And so I was like, well, why is that considered a benefit or a good thing, or, move in a positive direction? And so I just went through a couple of pages and looked at this, and I landed on a socialist page. So this will be a nice contrast to the Auroville thing that we'll talk about later, which is going to be basically knocking socialism. This is more of an economic view on socialism, but it's unions and stuff that are dwindling and not very strong. But in the end, really, the big happy smiley face that we've got on the economy right now, the Fed is saying that it's getting close to raising rates because everything's getting better. This article here basically is saying that not quite so much. The U.S. economy added 151,000 jobs in August. And at first thought, if you don't really know much about the economy, you think, oh, wow, 150,000? That's a ton. But they were expected to do 180,000 in standard growth. But the other problem is, and this is a slowdown from previous month, is the unofficial unemployment rate is basically 4.9 when they expected it to be down to 4.7. So we're not basically growing as fast as we expected, but the big thing is what kind of jobs were created. So most significantly, the U.S. economy lost those 14,000 jobs, and they're key manufacturing, high-wage jobs. Like these are the kind of 40-hour work week, factory stuff that are well paid traditionally in this country. But the goods producing sector as a whole, which includes manufacturing, lost 24,000. So not the high-paid, high-wage manufacturing job, but just goods producing itself lost 24,000. So adding 4,000 mining and 4,000 in construction. So we're losing more and more of that hardcore blue-collar work base. The people that are so pissed off in the Trump camp and they want someone to blame, well, this is a really cool analysis for that. You are somewhat in between. You're not quite in manufacturing, but you deal with product and people, creating and selling and moving. Have you seen any lows, ups and downs, or are you basically seeing business as usual?
So we see both, honestly. I'll be honest, recently, we are based, because Steelcase, everything is based typically on Europe, because Steelcase has outsourced enough of their manufacturing jobs to other countries that it kind of dictates where the system falls, right? And so we saw a huge hit in July, just over the charts, and then August it slowed down, and in September it dumped. Everything dumped, especially in our finished goods realm. And so, in terms of manufacturing jobs, yeah, we dropped, and we're a small portion of Steelcase. We dropped 3 heads, and they were temps. And they were people that had to go anyway because there was issues with those individuals, yada, yada, yada. But needless to say, we haven't replaced all 3 of them yet. We just haven't. I mean, we haven't had a need to. Our dollars that we're bringing in have not justified adding 3 more bodies. And so we are seeing a a decrease somewhat in our production values. And I guess I don't want to say because we're not part of the production, because we are part of the production. We're just the end scope of the production. Basically, production produces, dumps into our department, and we distribute out to the different parts of the company.
You're part of logistics. It's an important thing that has to exist between the manufacturer and the consumer. It's one of the things that I'm in the diesel trucking manufacturing area. So no matter what I do, I'm in a fairly safe area when it comes to automotive, because we have to ship stuff throughout the country until, I guess, drones bring everything everywhere. Diesel trucks and boats and trains are the way to go still. And so that kind of protects my job and gives me a little bit of job security that not a lot of people in manufacturing had, especially when we were talking mining and construction. Housing's production has gone down, as well as commercial buildings. I was listening to NPR the other day, and that's what they were talking about. The next place to go here, though, is, well, if jobs are going up, what are we getting? And so the entirety of the jobs created in August, the entirety was in the service sector, which is dominated by low-wage, contingent, and part-time employment. So first off, that's to me, taking off 25,000 jobs and adding 25,000 low-wage, part-time, and contingent jobs, like contract jobs. That's not an equal raise. That's not a benefit. That's it's a detriment and an increase in wage economy and wage inequality and wage stagnation and stuff like that. So for 8 years after the 2008 financial crisis, wage growth basically remained suppressed because of these types of things, because these jobs are becoming the norm, and we're stopping this innovation and production. And it's basically, like you said, outsourcing outward to people who will do these jobs for less money, thanks to the trade agreements and stuff like that. So this is just something that's been happening. Average hour wages have risen by 2.4% over the past year, but only 1.6% after accounting for inflation. So it's still a very, very slow growth. We did have some positive news recently with that this is the first time that median income growth had gone up in a long time in the United States. So that was good. But going on to the labor participation rate, that fell. So we've lost basically labor participation, and it's basically down to where it was at the lowest in the 70s, the Cuban Missile Crisis and stuff like that, where we had oil problems and we had these embargoes. But the Center for Economic and Policy Research, basically the people that are in charge of basically seeing what's happening as far as labor participation is going, said that men between 25 and 60 it's plummeted. It used to be 98% employment in 1958. Now it's 88% today. And that's considered really bad. That's where the unemployment issue is. And it's like, well, where are those people if we're under 5%? And a lot of them have just essentially dove completely out of the market.
So I'm going to ask, and maybe this is a little off topic, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but let's look at it this way. So we look at Michigan, and when we're talking, I've been employed for 15 years or more now. When I first became employed, we went through this recession, we went through all these issues, and they extended what was called like unemployment. So you could get unemployment for X amount of weeks, X amount of months, and then you could get like a secondary federally subsidized unemployment. Well, Snyder, our wonderful nerd, I don't even remember what his Twitter handle is now, but
it's a lie if it has nerd in it, because that guy is definitely not a nerd.
But it does. Anyway, so he helped and didn't renew and didn't apply for some of this federal assistance when it got cut, right? And so your unemployment, when it ends, you're done. You're out of luck. You go get another job. And one of the big reasons I think unemployment has gone down in Michigan is because people have had to settle. Now, over time, it has pushed the wage up. So, for example, I've worked at my company a year and a half. Entry-level positions were hired in between $10 and $11 an hour. Now we're hiring in between $11 and $12.50 an hour, depending on your skill set. But originally, people had to settle. People had to settle, especially manufacturing, because they could do that. Because it was, we're going to outsource jobs, or we're going to pay you less because we can't afford to pay for all these things. And that's, for me, that's one of the things what I thought we would talk about, and what I'm hoping we're going to get to is how do we analyze and look at that? Because if the non-socialist economy, and I'll just lightly touch on that, the pay-for-play economy, isn't working and is creating this, but eventually allows it to catch up, will the socialistic style economy solve some of those problems?
I don't really know when it comes to the long term whether or not the pay to play, pay for play stuff will ever catch up, because even though we're seeing basic wage increases a little bit, it's slow. They're talking about 1.6%, which is below our productivity level and below our interest rates when it comes to the way things used to be. And so we're still seeing really slow, stagnant growth. And so I don't think it'll ever catch up when it comes to the pay for play stuff, and when it comes to the right to work states who have basically made it unimportant to have union representation when it comes to buying for your wages. If we see the unions and the people come back and bringing strength to that worker market, that maybe we could see that get pushed back up to the point where these socialized programs and stuff aren't much more of a necessity, because your union would fight for you to keep you from having to get on the government's dime. It would basically fight the companies, the corporations, the people who routinely are listing record profits nowadays. They would have to take that money and distribute it back into the system the way it was when unions were really powerful, and they could fight for that money. But now we have people that are getting dividends from these corporations, the people that are removing jobs and closing up shops. They're taking you, your former employee, people they used to pay well, and they're putting you on government subsidies, and maybe hiring you as a part-time temp or something. So they're still benefiting from your work. They're forcing you to do more work and lower time pay, lower time periods, but you don't have that union representation, so they have all the power, and they can give you a little bit more money possibly, but you still need, instead of having your pay wages increase at a normal rate so you have a living wage, they are paying you less. And so now that they can subsidize you through the government. So essentially they're getting the subsidy. That's what we talk about with Walmart getting that money. They're basically saying that Walmart is the biggest welfare recipient in the country because they pay their wages so low that they force people to get into this, which is funny because Walmart is the next thing I got on the list here. Walmart is setting up to cut 7,000 of its best paying jobs. So when Walmart is starting to lose money, something's going on when it comes to what they're doing. So they're trying to make more efficient programs and things like that.
So I'm going to interject this in there. So it honestly almost felt like Walmart was capitalizing. From what you're telling me, Walmart was capitalizing on federally subsidized differences, right? Because they hired so low-wage workers. Yeah, and they manipulated.
In order to stay alive, they need that welfare subsidy from the government.
And now that welfare subsidies is running out, and they're not getting as much money, probably thanks to a Republican Congress and Senate, they're not getting the same amount, that they were getting before. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of ironic that, we get the Republican side in, and now we're seeing these cuts.
Well, maybe if you think about it with a Costco perspective. So Costco is the same idea as that big box corporate structure, and they pay their employees well. They're not having any financial difficulties. Their minimal pay is $15 an hour. Like Costco's idea is the antithesis of what Walmart did. So they essentially went for the short-term max profits to see if they could maximize everything for the people who own the company. And they are really go all over the place and use people as a resource. Well, Costco has kind of got the same idea as far as their business plan, but they use their people as a lasting resource, and they want them for a long time. And so what we're seeing is what the consequences of that are. This is a nice basically example of what kind of that short term use humans as a resource, as something that can be used and tossed away. This is the kind of thing. This is the future you have without taking care of your employees and the people. Anheuser-Busch is doing the same thing. They just bought SAB Miller. They're getting rid of 5,500 jobs. The company that has America on the cover of its beer is cutting 5,000 jobs in the next 3 years.
Yeah. And another statistic that you have in there is you talk about what they've done over the last, 6 years. They've added 1.85 million low-wage jobs. Now, you would sit there and go, well, that's good, right? They've added 1.85 million. We hear Obama say this all the time, and we do. And I'm going to be a little critical here because I don't like that statistic that we've added all these jobs in, but yet we're not paying people more money. Yep. So the cost of living goes up. we're minimally increasing people, but yet what are we doing to actually get them out of that bottom tier of Maslow's pyramid?
If we're increasing jobs, but we're not increasing wages, we're increasing the number of low-wage jobs, and we're decreasing upper management and manufacturing jobs. You're just by looking at the statistic of creating jobs, it's not a good metric for the health of society. It's actually a terrible example of how you can look at something and say, well, this number is really high. We're doing great. But it's a very good example, if you look at it through the right lens, of what we're doing is actually driving wage inequality in this country.
So how about this? Do you see, and maybe we should look at this on a long-term statistic, ramp, I guess. You kind of want to look at it a bell curve, right?
Yeah.
And so what we see is all of a sudden the government created all these low-income wage jobs. To be honest with you, it almost feels like it just, I want to swear so bad right now, but it almost just feels like we are working towards competing with third world countries and what they pay these people, right? That's what it feels like. And so I would be very interested to understand and look at what the curve is. So as soon as, we create these low income wages and we can't spend money, we actually are decreasing the wealth inside of our country because we don't have money to buy things or do things anymore. And people have to cut back on, what they purchase and what they spend their money on.
Without question.
And so there you go. You have homework, Hannah. So next week I expect to have a fuller report. But think about it. I mean, in true logic, if this happens and that correlates, that would almost actually be a valid argument for not creating more low-wage jobs. That we should create a percentage of we want this amount, this amount, this amount. For again, when we talked about my company earlier and what we had to cut, right? We cut 3 people when we needed to. And, now we don't have the cash flow to hire them back. Well, those people were temps. We have a percentage of our small department that is temp labor. And they do get hired in if they're over so many days. But for the most part, we've churned and burned long enough to be able to keep that very low percentage. And then that allows us to fluctuate, during these times.
Well, we pretty much completely covered what I wanted to cover as far as what this article covered. And I just want to go with what they closed on. It says the stagnation of wages, continued loss of manufacturing jobs, and increase in mortality rates of workers all give to the lie that Barack Obama is claiming that things have never been better for Americans. That's just, it's not completely true. I wouldn't call it a lie, but it's definitely a sleight of hand. But perversely, the stock markets closed up for the day when this article was written. So the negative economic jobs report, basically expecting would affect the Federal Reserve to delay interest rates. It doesn't seem to be that's the truth. So basically, to leave everyone, I want to ask just a couple of questions for people interested in this, and maybe even we'll touch on a couple of them. But what does this matter? Our jobs are jobs, right? And it seems like there's a difference between the quality of jobs and the pay of these jobs and your skill set, and how we don't have skilled trades that are taught in schools anymore. Then what's the difference between low skill jobs and then if it's got room improvement and skilled positions? Is there room for growth, or is it a dead end place just like low skilled jobs are? And then who stands to benefit from these reports? Who stands to benefit from a high job creation, but through the long term and short term? And then finally, how do we increase skilled positions so that they might be something that is affecting the lack of personnel and such training? So we just don't teach these kids. There's machine shop classes and civics and stuff we talked about last week. The skilled stuff, welding and working on cars and electronics and stuff. That stuff is the first stuff to get cut with the music programs when it comes to schools just trying to meet graduation requirements and the Common Core requirements and stuff that are specialized or they're not specialized, they're just standardized throughout the country. I think those are some of the issues that we need to hit in the future on this topic.
Yeah. And I agree with you because, even in my organization, we have kind of the same issue, right? We bring these temps in and we churn through them because they're not skilled labor. They're the bottom of the barrel sometimes because my company doesn't want to pay enough to bring the skilled labor in. And I argued this, and in my specific department where I actually affect change, they brought somebody in, they brought them in, at a decent wage, and, now I'm getting better output. But guess what happens? That person goes, well, look, I can help do all these other things, and I can improve the company. I want more money because they're still not even paying that person, a 15, a living wage, right? And I guarantee you and me and somebody else would probably disagree on what's a living wage, whether the government should even dictate this, right? And I know that there's other people that disagree with me, on that. But that doesn't
if everyone
mean
had all the data, I think we could try to find something in the middle ground for everyone.
And I agree. And I think we should increase more skill positions, and we should be looking to our youth to try and get them through some of these programs so that they get over that small hump. But that's enough about American jobs. When we come back, we're going to have an interview live with Robert Ray, founder of Original Motto. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
Promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
What's something I could do with a very sexy lady friend of mine that people would find provocative, interesting, and entertaining enough to tune in week after week? Oh, I know! A podcast! If you'd like to hear me and Kate be provocative and thought-provoking week after week, join us on the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast. We'd love for you to be part of our audiological three-way.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Oh, that was a quick break, everybody. And if you ever listened to my old show, you would know that's a lot quicker break than we ever used to take. We used to take like 5-minute breaks, and then we did used to do a 3-hour show, and we drank a lot, so you had to pee a lot, and yada yada yada. But the nice thing is that now with the shorter breaks, it forces us to move through faster, and Hannah and I don't get chit chatting like we used to, and forget we were live. And anyway, back to the show. Thank you for tuning into episode 51 of Cellar Door Skeptics. If you missed the first segment, we talked quite a bit about our discussion of American jobs. And Hannah and I looked at a couple different angles, where the jobs were going, and whether we should even be proud of Obama for creating 1.85 million jobs. And so make sure you go back and check out that portion of the episode so you can determine whether we were correct, and then tell us where we were wrong. Send us a tweet at CellarDoorSkept, or you can send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. But before we go any farther, we want to bring on a guest who reached out to us, and when we looked into what they were doing, their mission statement, their accomplishments, we thought we have to have this guy on. And I'll be honest, our show has definitely been very non-atheist, non-secular oriented focus. We've been focusing more on the skeptical side. We've been focusing a lot on politics. But this happens to kind of fit both. So we get to go back a little bit to some secular roots, as well as being able to talk politics at the exact same time. And I know that tickles Hannah's fancy. I know it tickles my fancy.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to talk with, in a second here, Robert Ray from the Original Motto. And his mission statement is to put E Pluribus Unum back in its proper place as a national motto of the United States, just as the fathers intended. And on their website, they say this. They say, it is our goal to have the national motto changed to E Pluribus Unum. This motto, our motto, was created by our founding fathers and is intended for us to have. It is enshrined in some of our earliest documents. It was on our coins and had been the de facto model until 1956, fear of communism. So please, without any further ado, welcome Robert to the show. How are you tonight, sir?
Happy to be here, and let's get rolling on this.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your organization. Tell us about how you founded, how you started it. Just give us the high the 1,000-foot view, 1 million foot view.
Well, you covered a good deal of it. Our mission is, of course, to change the motto back to Pluribus Unum as our founders intended. The idea came to me when I was fighting a local In God We Trust council decision. They were trying to put In God We Trust on the county council wall in Pierce County and Clark County, Washington. And the idea, and I wanted a better way to fight them because we'd been fighting, this is a secular issue, your constitutional issue. And the one thing they could always do with this was say, it's our motto. You can't say anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it came to me that maybe we should change the motto. That's the only way we're going to get this one fought because of the legal ramifications that have already happened on this.
Yeah.
So, and that was kind of the brainchild that came up, and the original motto project came out of that. So within a few days of the Clark County issue back in March of 2015, I had the website ready to go, the mission statement, all that stuff was ready to go. So I just kicked it off.
Well, awesome. And you had these things called steps for change, and I don't know how in depth you want to get into them, but I think they were very good steps. So I'll give the highlight of the first one, and let's talk about it and kind of move on to the second one, because I feel like you're correct. We do want to change that, right? And how many times have we had to fight this argument? How many times? I've only been an out atheist for 4 years, but I see these things. Now being involved in the secular community. And, trying to get into activism a little bit, I see these statements, right? You see them everywhere. And it's amazing to see the subtle intrusions that religion has had into our lives.
Right.
So your first... Go ahead.
I was going to say, a lot of that intrusion, the bigger stuff, because a lot of people tell me this is small chump change, right? But a lot of that bigger intrusion is based on this being our motto. They actually use this as an excuse for, religious laws or things like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I've argued with my religious uncle about some of these things, right? He's gone out of his way to say, hey, look, it talks about a creator and, God, and everybody was religious, therefore we should be able to push religion on everybody,
Right.
So one of your first steps for change, and I thought, this was a very important one, is oppose the drive to have the current national model displayed on public buildings. So now, what I would ask is, let's say they change it. Would you be opposed to the national model if they created a more neutral model or went back to our original model like you guys have that was specifically, I'd say, secular in nature?
No, I would not. I would not oppose that being on buildings because, I believe the current motto is a religious motto, and that's why I oppose it. So
okay.
If we were to change it to something better, E Pluribus Unum, I'll even take We the People, because that's the first line of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that would be appropriate on buildings.
That definitely sounds like one that would be very inclusive. I think the Latin has some touches and some feels back from the old days of the Catholic Church and stuff like that. So I think people would be more, responsive towards the modern, updated version, like the We the People. I do definitely like E Pluribus Unum just because it does seem to have like a root moment in our creation of our country. But
right.
If there was some way to get into the modern populace, this could be a good place to start at least.
Right. Yeah. And the whole reason we chose E Pluribus Unum was because it's on the Great Seal. It is currently enshrined as, a slogan of the United States already.
Yeah. So do you feel, and this is a little off topic, but do you feel by changing this that you're going to, because I hate to say religion is non-inclusive, but that's what it is. In true reality, genuine Christianity, when they start to oppose people like you, like me, when they start to go against people that are, are Islamic, and they use these things, do you feel if we change the model that would help over time deteriorate some of that inclusive aspect and create it so it's more of an open atmosphere inside of our country?
Yeah, I think it would. And what it would do is it would take away the concept that we are a Christian nation. We would be able to finally leave that behind. Because a lot of we're a Christian nation people go back to the motto, "In God we trust." So obviously we're a Christian nation. So I think it would open a lot of doors if we didn't have that motto the way it is.
You definitely run into people who talk about, okay, well, that current motto was changed in 1956. The money and everything was in 54, 53, 57. So basically right around that Red Scare time zone when there's a lot of paranoia and fear in this country. But even though you point to that date as the origin of these changes and not the original motto, not the founding fathers' enshrined ideals when people say that this country was founded as a Christian nation, they're skipping the history. They're just ignoring the fact that there's a documented moment in history where we can show them this. It's an issue that even changing it away, it's like I don't think people are going to accept some of this stuff. It's like, well, it's always going to be a founding fathers' initial Christian creation when it comes to this. So if we get rid of this, maybe in a few generations, the children will have always grown up with E Pluribus Unum or We the People or something, that we might finally be able to leave it behind.
Right. I certainly agree with that.
So tell us a little bit about how you guys and girls, I guess, how your whole organization is actually going about, creating this change for step one. I mean, how can people get involved? So people listening to the show, people wanting to be involved in what we do and what you do, how do they get involved just to help accomplish step one?
So one of the best things they can do is obviously go to our website and get our updates. Which is originalmotto.us. That's obviously step one.
Okay.
And then you can make. Sorry, I lost train of thought there.
That's okay.
Then you can, if you have an "In God We Trust," what we call a violation, you can report it at our website. You can report it. That's step one. Really, is reporting these things so that we know that they're going on. Because I can't find all of them. I'm pretty good at researching this stuff, but it certainly helps when there's a local on the ground. Mostly because we will work with a local to present our own plaque or sticker for those that are considering it, and that has a lot more value to the elected official if one of their constituents brings it up instead of somebody from Washington State bringing it up.
Yeah. Well, and, I think the FFRF runs into some of those things, too. As they start to represent people and they start to talk about these different things, people are kind of like, well, what are you talking about? You don't live here. You're just being intrusive to be intrusive.
Right. And I get that a lot, actually. There are so many times when I will go and we'll contact these guys on their Facebook pages or Twitter or whatever. And I would say almost 100% of the time somebody comes up and says, "You don't live here, you have no say so." I'm like, but this is an American issue, a federal issue. I live in America. I have the right to comment on this. So,
and I would agree. And what? And maybe this argument never comes up, but think about it this way: if you're representing or going and talking about this, how many silent people are there? I mean, non-religious individuals are the fastest growing minority inside of that religion that's out there. So, but just by pure statistics alone, you're probably representing some people that are probably scared to have that conversation or come out sometimes because it could affect their whole lives.
Exactly. And that's one of the points that I usually make at, within the second or third comment after that, sometimes first, depending on the wording, that, there's probably people in this county or whatever municipality that will be afraid, especially if it's, say, their sheriff putting it on their patrol cars. Could you imagine being the guy that lives there in that county and the sheriff knows who you are and you oppose what he did?
Oh, yeah. I can.
Yeah, and that's part of why we do it the way we do it, is to make sure that everybody at least gets that voice.
You mentioned on your other steps for a change to ask your local government to display the original motto. So you're basically trying to say that get involved and talk to your local representatives, the people that are local, commissioners and people, if you see something along those lines. And if they basically come back with more of a negative response or something like that, that's when they should try to find other people who feel similarly and contact you and just try to get something started. Or are you talking more like state level, like a little bit bigger?
Actually, this is almost always fought on the county and city level. It's really hard to fight this on state levels because legislators are really difficult to work with, just historically.
No kidding.
So it's a lot easier and it's a lot more personable when you can actually go up to your county council member and you know who they are. They might actually be one of your neighbors. It's not like, your legislature is one of maybe 120,000 people in your district or something. But when you live in these cities, then you have an actual connection with them.
That definitely sounds awesome. We got involved with our local community. My district congressman that's running, well, he's not a congressman yet. Hopefully he will be, but he's running for Congress in my district, and we talked with him and got him involved just on the show and just to say something. And he's been a member of CFI and free thought movements and stuff. He's very receptive to the idea of separation of church and state. And so it's once you get into it and just maybe mention a thing or two here or there with your local representatives and find out who is your representative, or find out, just get involved and pay attention. You may learn that, hey, these people really are cool, and maybe they want to hear from their constituents, and just your voice being out there and saying something is a start to get your voice heard. And I would think that your movement or your group would probably be the same way. It's just showing that, hey, it's like a non-believer movement, saying that, hey, there's other ones of us out here, and just your existence will help push people to try to make change.
Yeah, even if it's just an email to your congressperson. I mean, somebody's going to read that, and if they get enough emails on a subject, it's going to go to the actual legislator. So
everybody spam email.
So I have a question, and going through some of your website and stuff like that, do you keep like a record of counties? Is there like a way to look at all the different counties and go, okay, these are the ones that are violating?
Right. I do have a list. It needs to be seriously updated. I'm about 2 months behind on it. If you'll notice, I do have a map of the sheriff departments and police departments. That's a little bit easier to do because there's only 300, and I've kept up with that since the beginning of those. With the cities and counties, I came into it a little late, and there were already 700 by the time I got to it.
Oh, wow.
And I have to go in and research the contact information and get their address and put it all on the map. That takes time, and time I don't necessarily have.
Yeah, which is why you want volunteers, right?
Yeah.
There you go. See? I'm plugging you.
Yeah, there you go.
So
I'm about 65% through that list. Places like California and Texas were just murder on me.
Yeah,
so.
I can imagine. It's funny because you bring up the map, because I wanted to see Michigan, because, I'll be honest, I didn't look at your map before we went live, and so I was like, hey, I bet you guys got a map on here. Oh, there it is. And, oh, look, there's some in Michigan. Oh, there's, I think there's one right in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that
Waterville Eat.
I'm going to guess this entire map is all of the states that ratified the ban on gay marriage. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, there's some outliers like in Idaho, and just got a couple in New Mexico I have to update, one in Arizona. So, yeah. There are outliers, but most of it is that southeast section, Texas to Virginia.
Yeah, and I think this, in my opinion, I like the map. I think it goes very well, with the site, because it allows somebody like me who doesn't know a lot about this, who I do see offenses, but I don't see them on vehicles, not the same way other people do. I mean, some of the pictures you guys post, I go, holy shit, I've never seen any of that on our vehicles, and then I look online and there's 4 of them in Michigan, and I go, I think somebody needs to get some phone calls here. and so, it's kind of funny because you see these things. So I have another question. Does your organization ever partner with American Atheists or with the CFI to kind of talk about how to discover some of these things? So to me, this interview that we're doing right now is something, and we're a small game compared to some of the other, people out there. But CFI, I would love to see CFI pick this up. Michigan has like the second largest CFI organization in the United States. And
I
this
would
is
love
huge.
to see CFI pick this up as well. I've actually contacted some of the other groups, and the problem is they see this that they don't necessarily see it exactly this way, but this way I kind of take it is that this is small fish. It's not something, and due to the court decisions on it, it's really, really hard to fight. So they're not going to put a lot of resources into it. FFRF has been excellent at sending letters to sheriff departments and things like that, but that's really as far as they can go. And that's kind of the stopping point. That the big groups, they have their own things, right? They have their own things they got to spend their resources on. And which is why I created this, is so that we have something to go to make this happen.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, every little bit gets your name out there. Hopefully it allows for more people to see the need for this and to allow for change. Because I think, for me, when I came out, I didn't have to worry about a comfortable landing, let's say. I already had a group of people built around me for the most part that were secular or irreligious, basically, that I was around me. Now, I decided I wanted to get into activism, to be outspoken, to, start to challenge the status quo, which was a little different. I lost a lot of friends that I thought were friends, based on, my outbursts and my discussions. But I've also made a lot of really good friends. Our friends over at Paleo Radio, those guys are like the best people in the world to have these type of conversations with. Because even if we disagree on some things, we all both very adamantly agree on the separation of church and state. And I think that's a big unifier in the secular community. I think it's something that if we could get enough people on board, we could move this forward a little bit faster and create a larger social change that would help more people come out, which will do what? Get rid of religious influence on our politics.
Correct. And that's part of why I wanted to do it, was to remove that one thing that they can use against us.
Agreed.
Which is the model, yeah.
Yeah. So your last step, and I don't want to take too much of your time up tonight, but your last step was to change the motto. Right. So what do you mean by that? Is that the same thing as step 2, or is that you going to the point where we're going to create a national movement to change the motto?
Yeah, that's the goal, is a national movement to change the motto. Sadly enough, it literally takes an act of Congress.
Yeah, I know.
So what it's going to take is changing the social structure and the view around the motto, which is why I've set this up in this particular fashion. This is a long game. This isn't instant change.
Yeah. Well, and I would agree with you. If I don't know if you listen to Dan Carlin at all, and he's not extremely liberal, but he talks about, the middle, and he talks about how do you change things on a world scale. Now in this instance, we don't need to be on a world scale here because this is just the United States. But it's still large-scale politics. It's not something that can just change overnight. It's not something where either of us could just walk in and say, hey, you guys are going to do this. It takes us changing who we vote for and how these people are voting inside of these, large establishments.
Right. And that's part of why we oppose it every time we see it, because every time it goes on a building or on a sheriff's department car, it gets more and more entrenched.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes harder and harder to fight.
That's basically where I wanted to take this is we're looking at, to bring Dawkins into it, we're looking at scaling Mount Improbable, right? The only way we can get to the steep side of Mount Improbable is to have a giant pile of money. Otherwise, it's the slow game. It's the long game that you mentioned. And so what we're looking for here is money, unfortunately. And that's the way our system works, and that's the way our government is lubricated. And so Kate in our chat is asking, where can I buy an E Pluribus Unum bumper sticker? Where can I get some merch? How can I get involved? And if I can't personally get involved with, marching on the state capitol or the city building, how can I maybe make some contributions or maybe buy some merch from your group?
Sure. So, as always, you can donate to our group on our website, originalmotto.us, but we do have a store set up, which is called originalmottoproduct.com. That one was, there's an interesting story behind that. Back, I think last May, Fox and Friends had picked up on the In God We Trust issue, and they were talking about our project. Well, whoever it was, I forgot who it was. I think it's Greg Kilmeade or somebody like that, was supposed to say Original Motto Project, and he said Original Motto Product. So I went and bought the website instantly. So.
That's a good idea, though. It's good. I bet you guys have a lot of traffic for that.
Some of the best accidents are the best things that happen, really.
Yeah, I got some traffic for that, but not as much as I'd hoped. And yeah, you posted the Teespring, so that's where we do our T-shirts. But Original Motto Product has our bumper stickers and our stamps. So the stamping is something that's interesting.
Well, cool. You'll have to send me the link, and I'll post it in our description for anybody that is listening. But before we close out, you also do other other things, correct? You have your own podcast.
That is correct.
So we would be remiss, and we always tell the guests, hey, you got to plug where you are, but can we talk really quick about some of the other adventures and endeavors that you're involved with? Because, we enjoyed this portion of it, but we also wanted to get you to know you as an individual.
Sure. So I run a podcast called Secular Yakking, which has been around since, when did I start Secular Yakking? I think May of 2015. I originally started with my wife, and we had always had this nice back and forth banter, and we always talked in the car. So I said, you know what, let's do something with this. And originally my plan was to talk about the original motto project on it as a way to drum up support for it. Well, when she heard what I was doing, she said, you're going to put everybody to sleep. So she said, I'll do a podcast with you. And within a few hours, I had redone the entire concept behind it, and Secular Yakking was born. And we've had, I did 67 episodes with her, and she decided to move on to another project she's working on. So my assistant director from the original model project came on. He's actually a historian, which makes the show even more fun. So, he came on.
That's kind of what we're missing, because Hannah's like the scientist. I'm the political religious junkie. We don't have a historian, do we?
Not particularly. I think we just quote Dan Carlin like 30 times a week.
Fuck you.
So yeah, he actually runs a segment called Yak to the Past, where he brings up something that most people miss in history, or secular people are getting wrong, things like that.
That sounds great. We did one not too long ago on the transition between philosophy between the Republican and Democrat Party, because we see the memes all the time of Republicans voted 100% to abolish slavery and give everybody the right to vote. And then when we did some research on it, you find the history of these parties and how they've just kind of flipped around. This is an important thing to know of American history.
Yeah, I've been thinking about having Tom do a segment on that. Our last segment kind of took on Richard Carrier and his mythological Jesus. So
Ooh. So what was the name of that segment?
That's Yak to the Past.
Okay.
So, and cool. I think it was our last episode we did it.
Yep, it looks like episode 69, a day late and $1 short.
Yeah.
So real quick, as we close, tell everybody again where they can find you, where they can get a hold of you, and definitely where they can volunteer their time if they would like to help move the original motto project forward.
So the best way to get a hold of us is, oddly enough, on Facebook. Just look up the Original Motto Project or Pluribus Unum on Facebook. You'll find us. We have 50 groups set up, one for each state, so you can join your state group, so you can get news about your local. Obviously, originalmotto.us, our main website, and you can email me directly at robertr@originalmotto.us. And of course, podcast at Secular Yakking or secularyakking.com.
And of course, we'll post all the links into the description. And thank you so much, Robert, for taking the time out of your day to talk about this important project with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I was glad to do it.
Cool. Well, as we wrap up with Robert here and we move on to the next segment, I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't plug really quick where you could get a hold of us to tell us what segments you like on our show. So make sure you send an email to cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook as well, /cellardoorskeptics. Or you can send Hannah a personal email at Oh, you don't want me to give out your personal email, Hannah? All right, I won't do that to you.
Send it to realtrump@gmail.com or something.
So, anyway, we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics, because when we come back, we are going to be talking about the new innovations of quantum computing. We'll be right back with more
Hello, I'm
Cellar Door
Miss B.
Skeptics.
Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
Promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
What's something I could do with a very sexy lady friend of mine that people would find provocative, interesting, and entertaining enough to tune in week after week? Oh, I know. A podcast. If you'd like to hear me and Kate be provocative and thought-provoking week after week, join us on the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast. We'd love for you to be part of our audiological three-way.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
And welcome back to more Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for sticking around with us so much through that amazing first two segments. We talked about the loss of the workers' American dream. We talked with Robert Ray from the original motto. And now, Hannah's going to tell us what are the new innovations in quantum computing.
Well, quantum computing is pretty damn cool, first off, just because it's got quantum in the name. I absolutely love it. I've been trying
to... Is it as awesome as Quantum Leap, Hannah?
Yeah, I don't know,
Don't you like
man.
Quantum Leap? You don't like Quantum Leap?
I like Quantum Leap.
I think you just killed this segment right here.
I always felt weird when I saw one that was kind of like, oh man, that could be a little bit politically incorrect. Like there was one where he basically appeared in a new body and everybody treated him really weird, and he looked in the mirror and he's like, oh, I'm retarded, and it was a kid with cerebral palsy. I was like, oh man, you can't say that. But in the 1991 or whatever was a different time when it came to political correctness. So and then there's another one where he was a black guy in like the racial South. And so, I mean, some of those things were pretty, I mean, for their time, they were pretty impressive topics, but I like that show. But I like quantum computing more.
Well, and that's good. And I think that...
Tangent!
How about this? I'll be honest. I was not asleep at the mic, Jim. I was not asleep at the mic. How would he even... Jim, I was not asleep at the mic. I was taking a shot, though. So, I guess if you want to call that kind of asleep at the mic. But... You know, in reality, though, I've never seen Quantum Leap. Just so you know, Hannah, I've
Seriously?
never
How do you
seen
even know what it's called then?
I live with a 93-year-old lady, and we had to find new episodes of stuff she could watch, and she just didn't like anything that wasn't wholesome. So every once in a while, Quantum Leap would come up on whatever thing she was watching. You know, she
like
would
sci-fi.
watch that. Yeah, no, it wasn't Sci-Fi Channel. It was on the Old People Channel. She had some Old People Channel she watched.
I don't know what an old person channel is, but either way, quantum computing is the future, not the old people. But it's essentially what it is there's a limit to our silicon computer chips. The stuff that we have currently now, there's a limit to it. And so the idea that Moore's Law, which is the exponential increasing in computing capability, basically, that our computers will get twice as good every time period. I think it's every 2 years or every year. So there's an exponential growth. And right now we're at a very steep incline. Our computers are getting amazingly good, amazingly quickly. But there's a limit to how small and to what we can do with what we have. And so the Moore's Law is essentially coming to an end if we can't get into a new style of computing that can add more complexity. And quantum computing essentially gives us a chance to compute infinitely when it comes to the limits of the computer. So when you get to like our transistors and our CPUs and stuff, we're dealing with stuff that's 4 atoms wide on some of our connections and some of our copper and gold and silver and all that kind of stuff. So we can't get any smaller. We can't get electricity to properly conduct in those types of really small spaces. So we're getting into the new experimental computers. Basically, old computers, a standard model for computers is zeros and ones. So whenever you do something on a computer, it's just a giant series of zeros and ones. The new computers are just incredibly fast at processing all of that really simple binary data. Well, the idea of quantum computing basically allows superposition, which is something that can be in, like an electron, before you measure it, is in all these places. An electron circulate a nucleus, and until you put it in one spot, you have to say it's in all of the spots. And so quantum computing basically gives you the 0 and 1, but it also gives you all the points in between. The problem is that it's incredibly tricky and complicated to basically get around all of the limitations that come to quantum computing itself. Because like I said, when you look at an electron, it essentially forces it to be one thing, and your house of cards crumbles. Because if you've got 1,000 electrons and you're trying to compute a really complex thing on a quantum computer, if you actually measure the computing program, it causes it to collapse. All of those electrons are now in 1,000 positions. But if you don't directly measure those electrons, it's in all of the positions. You have an almost infinite number of solutions, and so you can get an incredibly complex look at something that's in some places we can't possibly compute with our current best computers. And that's the idea, the benefit of quantum computing. But the problem is, how do you measure something without looking at it?
I don't know. You'll have to tell me, because I don't know how you would measure it. I mean, maybe it's because I'm not as intelligent, as other people, right? But, to me, that almost seems crazy illogical. That almost sounds like you need faith.
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, you're getting into the fantastical world.
Don't talk about science in the faith realm. Aaron Furlong will be on the show going, I told you guys.
Well, you have to remember that the word faith itself depends on what you're giving it to, because you can have faith in science. Essentially, you're saying that there's something that we don't know, and I trust the concepts and the direction and the rules of science to continue to give us good information in the future. And the way the system is designed is to allow us to change. And, faith isn't in the scientific ideal or this philosophical ideal for science. It isn't a rigid lockdown thing. Well, there's essentially, you have faith in the scientific process. It's the word faith itself is not it's not a trigger word.
All right, so I'm gonna stop you right there, because you and I would debate on that for the next hour, and I think that would be boring to everybody listening. So, because I disagree with you, sorry, but we can talk about that later.
Well, it'd be semantics probably. It's basically, and in the end, what we're talking about is like a wave-particle duality in quantum computing. This is the basics for what is quantum computing. It's the old Schrodinger's cat ideal. You have to say that something is in two positions at the same time. Like we said, the electrons are in all the places until you measure it. The old Schrodinger's cat scenario that if everybody knows this, just wait a minute and we'll get to the meat. But for people that are new to quantum computing, essentially, it's a old logic pump, an idea that's really simple to help you understand that something can be in two places at the same time. So instead of an electron, you have a cat in a box. And inside that box is a piece of radioactive material that will decay at a 50% rate. So either it will or it won't decay. And there's a measurement device inside the box that if it does detect decay, it kills the cat. It releases a poison gas. And you close the box, and until you open the box, according to quantum mechanics, that cat is both alive and dead at the same time. That's the whole idea.
It's like a paradox almost.
It is to most people, because when it comes to our macro understanding, and it is macro when you consider the atomic and the particle scale, we are a macro level. Even though we are not nearly as big as the universe and planets and stuff, our cellular makeup and the way we see stuff is a relatively macro scale. So what we see in the quantum level is not what you would expect when it comes to the way our brains were developed and the way our senses are developed. And so this stuff seems counterintuitive, but according to our math and our analysis, it has been proven to be true until we learn more in the future that could change the way we think this, but it's still going to do the same thing. Our data is still going to be here, just we may learn something different to try to explain it in a different way. But this is the big thing for when it comes to getting out of Moore's law, is physicists are now working on computers and superconductors and semiconductors. And what we're trying to do is essentially control that quantum problem. We're trying to figure out a way to do all of this really crazy stuff when it comes to quantum computing, but to make it predictable and usable. So the whole idea of this entire little precursor to quantum computing is that some scientists have basically come up with a new experiment that allows them to start doing some really cool stuff that isn't incredibly theoretical. And so the whole idea is that they're creating a one-dimensional wave. So did you look at this at all and see what they were saying is, and how much did you pick up?
Well, I'll be honest. Some of this was a little over my head. This is a different arena. I've never done any investigation into this, outside of, hey, this is where I believe, this is what I believe, and how does this affect, I'm more of the evolutionary science guy. But one of the big things I picked up is, they quoted this, they said, if someone tries to get in the door, they have to push the people closest to them to make a bit of room. And what they're talking about is, in turn, those people push slightly on their neighbors, and so on, and so on, and so on. So they're talking about waves of compression, and how the quantum effect is basically like a triggering wave that can either create a traffic jam or cannot. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'll be honest, like I said, this is not something I've done a lot of research in out of what you've sent me here this weekend.
Yeah, sorry, I basically had a computer problem, so I just let you try to see what you had, and so no, I had
throw
to
me out the list.
Yeah, well, no, I just stuck it in to see if you had picked anything up, and so basically what you described is the situation, but we need to step back to see why were we thinking that things need to be lined up in like a trolley car like that, like a single tunnel. The whole idea of this is what they've done is they've taken electrons and put them in a one-dimensional wire. So, when it comes to dimensions, when we look at, like, you hear third dimension, so we have in 3 dimensions the space that we move in, and the 4th dimension is time, relatively, is what we usually give the 4th dimension to. But a 0 dimension, or a dot, is a single point, and then that has essentially no dimension. It is itself a point. A 1 dimension is a vector, a straight line, and there's no up or down or in and out. It's just things can move along that line. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to create electrons lined up in a line, perfectly straight, so that they've controlled any kind of opposite movement, and so essentially creating a wire that it's operating at the quantum level. And so they've manipulated. It's at 6,000
narrow strips of metal.
Yeah, but it's
hardcore,
it's super conductive stuff. It's let's see if I can say it. I can't even find it. It's a really really weird and special type of material, and I'll remember it probably in a few minutes.
Gallium arsenicide? Is that the conducting metal?
That's probably close enough. I don't know.
Yeah,
Anybody who wants to
Tanner
spell
drunk
check
speak,
Tanner,
so it's okay.
And
I had the best words. Come on.
Well, essentially what they've done is they've used varying magnetic field and voltage, and so they tunneled the electrons. They've basically moved stuff around so that they've created a tunnel with the wires, and a tunnel with electrons to make it seem like a wire. And what they've done is, by increasing the power that's going in and out, they've revealed evidence for extra curves that are predicted, so that they're getting quantum effects out of this. What they did was they created these wires, and then they started like the traffic jam. So the way they described it is the trolley car that you gave. And if you think of stuff in a straight line, they're packed all the way, and there's really no space between them. Then when you add something in the door, everybody has to get into a smaller space. Or you create like a ripple. So one person pushes another person, and you get this wave that moves from the back of the line to the front of the line, if there's room up the front of the line. And depending on how hard they push, it changes the frequency of the wave. It changes the intensity of the wave. And obviously, depending on how hard, heavy, and impactful that wave is how much energy that electron comes into it, the new energy put in. So this stuff's really important because it excites and makes the compressive wave move around. But when they measure this stuff, it's basically reacting in a quantum level. Nothing can touch. They can't hit each other directly. And so they're reacting at the quantum level. And it's allowing them essentially to simulate what we have for standard wires or whatever. But it's working at a quantum level. And they're basically testing their theories. Because what they've done is they don't just have directional momentum, the forward and back. They actually spin. You hear like electron spin, and we hear things like entanglement. Well, they can measure these electrons, whether or not they're entangled. So if you entangle one electron to another one, you spin one way, the other one, no matter where it's at, will spin the other direction. Basically, because you've checked it and measured it, that it'll spin that way. Well, they're getting these kinds of effects. The wave is moving and spinning in certain ways. So this is just more proof that what they're doing and what they're getting is proof of quantum activity. And that's the whole point here, is they've created this really nice experiment so they can test stuff. It's stable, and they're just throwing stuff at it. And when they throw too much energy at it, the original theory breaks down, and they're trying to break it. That's essentially what science tries to do, is just break stuff. And so when they did that, the tests confirmed their prediction.
So in essence, and maybe this is layman's terms for me, but in essence, what they're talking about is they're creating that tunnel, that subway. They're pushing them, packing these people into this train, and it's pushing them down. And the harder they push, the more people they're pushing out. And they're testing to see, can they push so hard that they knock everybody over and knock the quantum, we'll talk whether the quantum requirements or the laws out of whack. Is that what they're trying to get at?
Yeah, once it gets a high enough energy, it breaks down. And so they produce a hierarchy of different spin wave, and they call these modes. And those, so if you have a quantum wire like they've created, so they've managed to create a way to stabilize enough electrons in a line. One, that is a good thing, because quantum computers are incredibly susceptible to noise, and things that get in the way cause problems with the experiment. But they've broken the wave, they've broken the wire, and they get different modes. So when you add a certain amount of energy, essentially inside your quantum computer, they've said, okay, well, if you do this and this and this, these are the results. And so what we have here is, this isn't quantum computing exacted. This isn't quantum computing proved and increased to a usable level. This is essentially breaking down how and why, like a superconductor works, how and why our original processors did what they did. We're learning the little bits and pieces. And this was all published in the journal Nature Communications. And they believe that it will help scientists better understand the behavior of quantum mechanical particles and allow physicists to better control electrons in quantum computers, because that's basically what they expect to be able to do right now, is to use electrons, and that would be the bit that's sent places. And if you breaking back down to the bit is, and they call them qubits in quantum computing. And like I said, you have this 0 and 1 from standard computing. Well, in quantum, you have all the ones in between as well. And so for standard computing, it's 2 times 2 is 4. Or you're adding 2 and then 2 and then 2. And so you get this linear progression in complexity. Well, with quantum computing, you get 2 to the first power. And then when there's 4, there's 2 to the second power, which is 4. Or when there's 2. And then when you do 3, that's 2 to the third power. So what you get is an exponential growth in complexity. So when you only have a few systems working, like a computer itself, let's say you go 24 times. Well, a standard computer would do the same computation 24 times. And then you have your solution. Well, a quantum computer can do 2 to the 24, which is, if you basically folded something, a piece of paper over, 2 to the 24 is over a mile stacked high. Like, you have a huge number of computations that are happening. And what that does, and it's all happening simultaneously, that's the other benefit, is that a computer has to do 1, and once they have that solution, then the 2, then the 3, then the 4. Well, quantum computers, provided you don't look at it and don't measure it specifically, then you can do 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 computations simultaneously.
Okay, so it's the whole point, because it'll be able to speed it up. So for example, if we're broadcasting at so many bit rates, if they could take this and quantify and make it so that it could be at the user level, we could increase the amount of data that passes back and forth.
You could basically compute an infinite amount of data. That's what they're saying. That's the reason why we'd be able to continue Moore's law. So we right now we have limitations to basic computations. We talk about teraflop, which is, I think, trillions of bits per second. And a quantum computer, just a basic quantum computer, like what you would have at your desk, would be able to do 10, 20 teraflops. At the computers that we use right now, like our best computers are in the gigaflops, billions of computations per second. So teraflops are the absolute, mainframe, big-ass computers. Quantum computer that would fit on your desk, if it was a functional quantum computer, a relatively simple one dealing with maybe 120 qubits, would be able to do astronomical amounts of computations and incredibly complex scenarios and things that we can't even compute. We can't even start to compute on our standard traditional computers because of what the the potential of quantum computing is. It really is, if we can figure it out, the future of any kind of real technological advancement in this country, in the world, really.
And so, it kind of plays a little bit into, at my company, we partner with a company called Polycom, and they create these virtual, extremely expensive conference rooms that are mobile. And basically, they're meant to set up, tear down, and go places like the Middle East, for example. So the government sometimes buys some of these, and they'll take them, and they're very nice stations where they can communicate back to Washington, instantaneously. And so if this happens and they could translate this into civilian world, would this enhance some of the satellite technology that we have, which would create a greater ability, and I don't want to say to monitor people, but, to transition information in long distances at a better rate?
Yeah, they actually believe that it will perfect the idea of encryption as well. Like the entanglement thing that I was telling you about. In the quantum theory, technically, if I had an electron and I paired it to another electron, and I sent that other electron 91 billion light years away, so to the other side of the observable universe, technically, if I spun this electron one way or measured it and it was spinning the other way, I could guarantee you the other one was spinning the other way, that far away. That's the idea of quantum entanglement. And so when you put that into computing, imagine if I combined or entangled two electrons, and I sent you one electron encoded with a specific amount of information, and I spun it in a very specific way. But until you measure it, you'll never know exactly what direction it's spinning. Let's say we can tell very accurately in the future where the electron's spinning. When you get it, if it's doing anything else but what you're supposed to see, you know that it was looked at. It was measured before you got to it. In effect, it would essentially either break down the communication, so the other person maybe would be able to be blocked from getting any information just because they looked at it, or you would be guaranteed to get exactly your data. And if they didn't pick it up at the right end, so let's say the communication has two ports, and only your port or only you can get the right answer, no matter what they do in between, they'll always get the wrong answer. We perfected encryption. There is no way around it anymore because we have basically given the information itself an encryption method that is physics. It is,
it's infinite.
Yeah, and so
essentially,
and it makes everything technically move at the speed of light. That's pretty cool too.
So would that, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but would that translate into us being able to travel at the speed of light?
It would be more our communications could. If we could figure out a way to send something faster than the electromagnetic frequency waves or something. But I don't believe that you can broadcast in quantum. I think that's more stuck to the electromagnetic frequencies that we have that resonate throughout the universe. But if we could entangle something and send it off and, I guess, control its direction, it's possible. Understanding things like that, we could send stuff, but I really don't know how far along that line. Really, what we're looking at is essentially instantaneous world communication. It still is pretty instantaneous right now when it comes to the internet, but it's still got a huge lull compared to what you would get from quantum computing and the speed at which everything can be calculated. So you want to talk to something in super high def on your little handheld phone would be able to compute faster than the biggest mainframe in the country. That would be Moore's Law continuing. That's the idea, right? Think about computers that used to be the size of a floor of a skyscraper in New York. Now they're in a pocket of your pants. Well, you could either assume that, let's say, the device itself stays the same size and it just gets incredibly more powerful in its computational abilities, or you get it infinitely smaller, and so you would have a tiny little dot plugged into the side of your cheek, and it would connect you to everything and everyone in the world.
That's crazy.
Yeah, your creativity is your limit when it comes to quantum computing.
Well, that's amazing, and I think, as we close the segment out, I think that's very important for us to understand, because without that, we aren't going to be able to move society forward or move humanity forward as fast. Make sure you stick around, because we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics after this quick commercial break. We'll be right back talking about Auroville, India, and socialism. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hey guys, this is Wyatt Mathers from the Atheist Avengers podcast. You are listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
Hi, this is Dan, Brian, and Matt with the Godless Revolution podcast. We've had a lot of great guests on this show, such as Russell Glasser, Dan Arrow, Brian Fields, David Silverman, Doug Mesner, a.k.a. Lucian Greaves, and Joey Kirkman, whom we love a lot.
We've also had a lot of really cool local guests. And we're a podcast that likes to fight for the separation of church and state and against anti-skepticism of all kinds.
You should give us a listen, because if you don't, you're going to be really sad.
Make your ears happy. Listen to the Godless Revolution podcast.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
This is Deborah McTaggart from Beyond the Trailer Park, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Look into the sky once again and wonder why I'm contemplating the cynics and even in my life. I've never seen it coming through the demons that I summon like a legion by the dozen. I don't know what I'm becoming. I've seen the lights of horizons you may never know. But I've seen the gates of hell sometimes. I'm afraid that's where
And I do that every time. I gotta wait just to that point. So this time, Jim, I was not sleeping on the dime. I had to wait till that exact moment just so I could scream lightly into the microphone.
We're going to have to see if Shannon will come back on someday, and we can talk more about what he's got going on, and maybe some new updates on his music.
I know. I got to edit in. So a little side story for those listening to us. When we recorded with him afterwards, I was like all nerding out, and I was like, okay, hey, can you do something? Can you scream into the mic for us? And I have that recording, but I've done nothing with it. I just have it. It's just like my personal
we
thing.
had him scream like, "You're with Cellar Door Skeptics!" Whoa! And but it was like cold, and he'd been talking for like an hour. It was like the meanest thing we could possibly do.
Probably, it was definitely not a smart idea. But again, it's part of those little quirks. It's some of the things I enjoy death metal, so that was a privilege for me actually. And I have a I like
cool
Christian music a little bit. So what?
Maybe it would have been cool if we all did it at the same time. Like all three of us are going to scream then, and then it would have been so putting him on the spot.
But anyway, back to the show. And before we get into our last segment for tonight, I just want to throw a real quick shout out to our Patreon sponsor and anybody else that wants to go on and sponsor us on Patreon or even share it. For the cost of the show, if we could hit 8 people a month at just $1 a piece, so that's 4 to 5 episodes, $4 to $5 a month. Less than you're going to pay for a cup of coffee at Starbucks or, that beer at your local watering hole. You can help support the show, and we'll take some of that money and we donate it to charity. So we're actually Hannah and I are due to donate whatever Patreon money we have, a portion of that to charity here in the next month. Though, technically, we did donate to charity 2 weeks ago when we were on the Atheist Nomad show. So... but we're going to go ahead and donate a portion of Patreon funds anyway to that. So if you'd like to help out, head over to Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. Again, you can sponsor us for $1 a month. You can sponsor us for $5 a month, $10 a month, $25 a month. I think we have it all the way up to $100. And we have different little level perks if you want to do that. And so, for the $1, you get our thanks, you get a gratitude. Heck, we'll throw, your name on the show if you want it. For $5 a month, we'll put you on as supporting Patreon. And once we start getting stickers and stuff like that, bought, right now we don't have any cash, so we can't do that. But once we get that, we'll be able to send you a sticker. And once we hit that $10 a month, you'll be on our show, and we'll also be able to do some sort of a little hangout every month where you could talk and ask personal questions of us. But enough promotion and stuff like that. We actually want to get back into the meat of the show. And so there's an article that came across, my feed. I don't know. This probably was about a month and a half ago, honestly, when I noticed it. And the article's not new. This is not some revelation. This is not something that just happened to join us and come on, recently. It was something that's been out there for quite a while. But there was a Slate article that talked about something called Auroville and, utopia. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting, right? I'm buying to the socialist camp. I like socialism. I don't know 100% if I'm sold solely that that's the only way to go. But this is an actual practicing, commune of some sort. Their goal is to create a universal town where men and women of all countries are able to live in peace and progressive harmony above all creeds, politics, nationalities. Their purpose is realizing human unity, right? That's humanism, right? And the farther I move down my political and religious path or non-religious path, the more I embrace humanism. And the more I look at humanism, the more I see some of these ideals. And that's what drew me to this article. And then I started to get into the article, and they started, bringing up some of the negative points. And I was like, okay, we have to do it now because I want to go through the article. I want to go, yes, this is good. No, this is not good. Yes, this is correct. Nope, this is the author being biased. As we all know, there's, some bias to some of everything, some articles that are written. But I really thought this would be a very good conversation because it'll allow us to explore socialism. And we would prefer to do it with, our friend's name? Oh, Hannah, what's the guy's name? And now I'm blanking.
John Larios.
John Larios. We'd love to have John. So, John, if you're listening, we would love to have you on the show to actually talk about this. But in the next best, we just have to tackle it ourselves. And so what drew me to the article is they talked about utopia, right? They talked about what is envisioned, what happened, how did this how did this create? Do we have a government that's free or a community that's free of government, money, religion, strife? Is it out there and does it work? And that's an interesting concept because if you look at our politics nowadays, if you look at how everything works and how everybody interconnects and communicates, you can't even begin to imagine a utopian society. I mean, even tonight I had a conversation with a friend of mine where we butted heads a little bit about where our moral values come from and how that influences our political decisions. And just the two of us are conflicting over this. So I can't even imagine building a community with the two types of personalities in one camp. But I'm not of the mind where I want that person to not live with me. I'm not of the mind where I don't want that person to communicate or interact with me. I want that. I want that communication. And as I explained to that individual, for me, when I start talking too much about a certain subject, I got to stop and look at it and go, okay, is there a counterpoint? What are the counterpoints? Am I moving too far close to this fringe side? And how do I get closer back to the middle where I can still hold my values, but create some sort of an interfaith or an intersectional crossroads that allows us all to work together? And that, listeners, is the real reason I wanted to talk about this.
So that's the background. That's what got you interested in
the
hopefully the non-Jim Jones what was that, Jamestown cult like utopian ideals, right? So this is a society that was created by a philosophical group of people who kind of sort of mostly agreed on what the problems with modern society were, and they have this new idea for creating a utopia on Earth, but without walls completely locking it away from society. So this is a utopia, but it still has, I picture like a malleable cell that can allow things to move in and out, and it has to have some kind of internal structure to protect itself, but also it can't be so rigid that it can never change and never let anyone in or out, like it's a big giant thought prison. So
well, and they ironically they have this large dome that they have in the center of the city.
Pauly Shore's in there, right? This isn't the Biodome?
It's not Biodome,
okay.
No,
well, I would love
Biodome.
to see the Biodome in India. I would think that they would probably start doing that. But either way, it's a really cool idea. I've always liked the concept of utopia, and once we get into what they've done here, we'll probably talk a little bit about the idea of utopia. And I had a book that I had talked with you about earlier, and we'll probably mention that. But this Auroville thing, like the whole idea, utopian idea, this place you can go that's, different and better than everything else. How do they pick people? Is it just anyone who comes in? Is there regulations? Is there a set of rules? Do you have to volunteer, or are you just, here's $5,000, you get to be part of the club?
Yeah, so they do have rules. They do have rules, and they, I'll be honest, they take a Marxist, flavored socialism, and then they mix it kind of with anarchy, is basically what the article talks about. And it's a huge, daunting, project that started at the beginning of the 60s, where somebody basically that they call the mother decided they wanted to create an environment with no money, no government, no religion, no skyscrapers, no newspapers, no headlines, no war, no poverty, and definitely no genocide. So what they did is they built the city with 50,000 people, and then now they probably have, about 10,000 people that are there. And, anywhere between 2,500 and 5,000 people are the residents of the city. You can't just come here, though. And that's the thing. You have to be approved. You can come visit for a set amount of time. That's what you can do. But you're not allowed to just, join in. You're not allowed to just, hey, I'm going to move here and, call this where I'm going to live.
So I can take my capitalist virus and go visit for a weekend?
You can.
Whoa.
And they have checks and balances, actually, to kind of, counteract that. So they have what they created, they call the charter. And basically what they say is that Auroville belongs to nobody. It belongs to humanity as a whole. But to live here, one must be willing to be a servant to the divine consciousness. Now, I'll be honest. The first time they talked about that, I got a little queasy. I did. And I said, goddamn New Age stuff. But I had to take a step back and say, okay, in the spirit of understanding, how do we move humanity forward? How do we get to a place where I would feel comfortable? And I don't know if I'd feel comfortable here. We can determine that in a little bit. You could tell me whether you wouldn't fit or not.
Just like with the Raz, we're sending you there for a month, man.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you what, if anybody wants to sponsor us on Patreon for about $4,000, I'll be more than happy to chronicle my journals in Auroville for a month. But they have a place where you don't need an education, but they have constant progress. And they talk about how the youth never age. And I don't agree with that because everybody ages. But the spirit of the community does not. They also talk about how they want to build a bridge between the past and the future. They want to take advantage of all the discoveries without, creating some sort of a restriction based, through money or government or religion. They also talk about, a site where material and spiritual research for living embodiment are created for unity. And so, it's a very vague charter. And it is honestly based off Siddhartha. So it's not, I can't say this is like their own original idea, right? They do take some bases of what they believe from other different types of spiritualistic religions, right?
Well, they kind of have to, because I would argue that religion itself, in a lot of cases, is kind of this amalgamation of humanity's more interpretive understanding of the way the universe worked. And currently where we are, there's no way to completely break away from that. So there has to be little bits and pieces, and maybe they're not specifically any kind of like savior complex, but they're going to have some maybe you mentioned consciousness, so they're going to have some, world community, world culture, we're all one, spirituality in the new age type thing. So like there's something a little bit more, or we don't know everything, so there's this way we are all connected in feelings and emotions and why the brain does what it does. So essentially neuroscience unexplained section so far, and we don't know why we have some emotions and stuff. So like that could be, that little gap that we're using to fill with spirituality in this kind of place. But most of it just seems to be based on social communication, social structures, and like humanism itself.
Yeah. And so what they do is they talk about how they want you to go on an inner discovery journey, right? And again, this sounds very woo-ish.
Do they have?
I know.
Do they have ayahuasca?
I don't know. Actually, probably not, because they don't allow alcohol. I can't imagine they're going to allow drugs.
Yeah, there's no way in hell DMT is coming into a place that doesn't have
no, and they don't allow alcohol, though they don't enforce you not having alcohol. They just discourage it, and they don't sell it there. But they talk about how you have to truly acknowledge that you're behind social, moral, cultural, racial, and hereditary appearance. That basically you want to be free, and you want to know what awaits in your journey for discovery, right? And this is to become, you have to pay a penance basically to get in here. They don't just let anybody in to live here for free. So one lives here in order to be free from moral and social conventions. But this freedom must not be a new slavery to the ego, but must be able to fulfill one's desires based on the way of the inner discovery, which can only be achieved through peace and transparency of the perfect disinterestedness, is what they call it. You should also lose a sense of personal possession. So basically, you're not going to have a specific material world. So material possessions are not your thing there. What?
It sounds very Buddhist. It's kind of like
Siddhartha is a Buddhist.
The earth and the universe is the spirit, and you're just trying to be a harmonious existence.
Yes. And our friends over at No Religion Required actually had a 3-part segment on Buddhism and secularism. And if you go over to their websites on Spreaker, you can find their episodes, and you can listen to them and download them. And they talk more about that side of it. I'm not going to get heavily into the Buddhist thing because it's not really my thing. But they do talk about how you have to get rid of your personal possessions. They talk about how manual labor, how indispensable you are, and that you have to let the consciousness organize a bit of a matter by the means of your body to do good. You must embrace yourself. You must help organize without creating artificial rules to help not waste other people's time. So for example, what they're getting at is you can't produce and farm for yourself. So if you were able to afford the largest lot on the land and you're able to produce the most corn, we'll just say, the goal should not be to produce that, hog it from everybody, and manipulate everybody into being somewhat of a slave to you. It's that you're going to give back.
So Donald Trump's not allowed.
No, he's not. He could afford to buy into this, and that's a nice thing about this. They have different facets, right? So it's like you need money to live here. You just can't come here and go, oh, hey, here's a house. Oh, that's $1,000, right? I got that. It doesn't work like that. The houses are very expensive, and it's done that way to drive certain types of people away. But they also create a secondary tier where you have to volunteer. So when you come in here for the first couple of years, you got to volunteer X amount of your time. And then what they're hoping is by the time you volunteer that amount of your time, you're willing to volunteer more of your time after the 2 years are up. And they talk about that. They actually talk about how you can get in and volunteer. And they talk about how cheap it is. So you can volunteer and get room and board for 200 rubles, which is I think $1.75 a day. So you figure $1.75 a day times 7 is roughly $10 or $12 a week to live there. And that's just to live. So that's less than $100 a month to live in this place.
Well, I mean, relatively speaking, too, because if you think about when it comes to your normal payments in countries like Mexico and places like that, we have these massive differences when it comes to what you can survive on. And if you're a venture capitalist or if you're a tourist and what you would have in the United States versus what they have to live on, you can live like a king sometimes, which is basically a basic low wage job in the United States. But so essentially what we've got here is we've got this society that's created a pretty peaceful and semi-revolutionary way. It was created by the 60s counterculture, the flower power generation. And it's a psychological revolution they basically tagged it as. So I guess what are the criticisms then? Because everything here sounds theoretically quite nice. So are people assimilating to the rules and doing what they're supposed to? Or is it just kind of this devolving into a more utilitarian, capitalistic, people are taking more than they're supposed to and devolving?
It actually does. Even the article doesn't have the criticisms of capitalism, right? That doesn't come into it as much, though they do criticize. They basically have this socialistic credit card you can get. So you go in, you pay a X amount of rubles, they give you this credit card that works everywhere. And basically you're supposed to use it to get goods and foods and services And then you, in exchange to pay it off, you do, different volunteer work and stuff like that. Though a lot of the shops they talk about take cash, obviously, because cash does more than probably a government card does, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the only criticism. The bigger criticism that they talked about, and again, we're going to have to get into this, is that they have an open gated community. So there's no big gates that surround this. And for those that are listening, I don't think I mentioned this is in India. This is in the center of India. In India. So, this is not an American or European type thing, even though it is somewhat influenced based on those that founded it.
So basically, this thing is in the middle of Siberia, away from everything in the world.
Exact opposite of Siberia. Yes, it's Siberia, but in the desert Siberia.
Okay, but there's still communities, cultures, people that are linked to modern society nearby.
Yes. Yep. And so, what they did is when they first started, they started building, basically dirt huts and shacks, and they started planting trees, tons of trees. And they actually, there's a way this is built, right? And the way the houses are centered, everything is centered in the center. And then in the very, very center, they have this meditation ball, is what they call it, right? And again, I don't disagree with meditation, but I disagree with it for spiritual, air quote, reasons. But they talk about how it's air conditioned, it seats about 100 people. They talk about people that come and see this, and it's a beautifully constructed dome, right? They say it looks like a golf ball. And so I don't know how beautiful a golf ball would be, but the other descriptions I have are a lot more. But they talk about, because it's an open gated community and there's other communities around it, how there's crime and how it can sometimes filter in the outskirts of this township. So you got to imagine a built city with no skyscrapers, no huge buildings, no highways, and no actual streets really, and then how that's surrounded by this huge forest. So they talk. That's one of the big criticisms in the article, is that they talk that you, as a woman, you shouldn't go out because you're going to be raped or murdered very easily, and the villages around there, that's what happens. And because of the way this community is set up, there's not enough law enforcement inside of this community to help police all the forest all the time. There's just not enough people to do that and to continue to process it. It's ruples, Dennis. It's ruples in India. I think I said rupees earlier, which is a Zelda term, but anyway.
Close enough.
And so what they do is they talk about, how do you get around here? You have to get permits, right? There's a lot of bureaucracy, but they have solar panels, right? And they go green. Their goal is to go as green as possible. They do have air conditioners, but they don't have central air in the whole house. And they all have very modest houses. There are a couple of bedrooms, a bathroom, nothing huge, right?
Well, so they kind of have to have air conditioning. They kind of have to have that
it's over 100 degrees.
Yeah, no. I mean, in India last year, I think they had over 1,000 people just die of heat. With global warming and stuff, places in India are seeing increasing temperatures. It's like having a major city in the middle of Death Valley. It's the hottest place, and people are just dropping dead, standing in the roads. And so, obviously, these are great things. There are a few things, modern amenities, electricity, technology, that are making their way in, which is why I mentioned that it's just kind of like a soft cell wall structure for this city, or this structure, culture, whatever they like to refer to themselves as. And so there's a little bit of modern society working its way in, and I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's there. It's keeping a utopia from being perfectly isolated to either prove out its philosophical ideals, or it's slowing it down. Like, it's slowing down its evolution into the perfect society.
Yeah. And so they talk about, so when the author first got there, they had to, basically show their Indian visa, right? They had to have some sort of visa that allowed in the country. They forgot to make it. They have a separate photo hut that you go and make photocopies for them in this really, dainty, segments of the building, right? But it's funny because they talk about the bureaucracy being very similar, not, or to America or Europe. It's a very similar bureaucracy. You can't just walk in, go, here's cash, boom, I'm here.
Well, we've definitely got, if you think about it, there's a bureaucracy. Government itself is a human-created structure. It wouldn't surprise me that there's going to be multiple layers and things that you would see in a normal society in here, because this is created by okay, this is where the Walden 2 thing is going to come in from what I was talking about earlier when I just mentioned it, is this is a pseudo-utopia, right? This is something created by people from a modern society, or at least a few generations back, and they said, well, this is our philosophical utopia. This is what we think would eventually be a perfect society, one at one with the earth and society. Everyone is, doing their own bit, perfect socialist utopia. And in the book, Walden 2 by B.F. Skinner, one of the best of his time psychologists, I highly recommend taking a look at his work. He's amazing. Joseph Casper and my good friend David Teachout, both psychology majors, experts, getting their degrees, getting more degrees. They highly recommend Skinner's work, and I agree. And even Daniel Dennett mentions it in Kinds of Minds, his work. So this guy's highly respected. Well, one of his books that I read in high school, it was Walden 2. And this idea, it's a utopian society. It's a giant thought experiment as to, could a modern society basically stop and make the perfect utopian structure, this perfect utopian society? And in this, they recognized the poisons from modern society that caused its problems. So they try to create this new utopia with a disconnect between the elder people who are starting it and administrating it and the new children and kids that are getting in there. And there's a disconnect there. And so they can't have it bleeding back and forth. And that's what I see here. It's like they're struggling. They're having difficult with crime and corruption and people not basically adhering to all the perfect rules. And it's kind of turning back slowly into
I want to stop you there. I want to be very careful because they're not saying that it's happening within the city per se. They're not saying you're being attacked by people that actually live within the city. It's from the surrounding areas.
Okay.
But the other issue that they have too, so we can relate this to that book, because what you're talking about is how do you cut off the old, to embrace the new, because the new is supposed to be more intelligent, more evolved, and allow for better ideas. And inside of here, and this is, going to be an attack I have, on religious belief and pseudo shit that they, that's the first swear word all night. But anyway.
It's okay, because that one's regular on cable TV, so we're still in the good.
But they talk about energy, right? And the author goes, that's a word they come to hear a lot of. And that's the big thing here, right? Is energy. They were worried about these suicides because they created a bad energy or a negative vortex. So if you were able to isolate people of certain age groups or certain things, you see that you could weed out some of these bad pseudosciences, illogical religious beliefs out of here. And in your book that you're talking about, that's what they would be doing, is they would recognize that there's no way to quantify or justify energy, air quotes, existing. So therefore, they would isolate that community in hopes that the new community wouldn't rely on that as much. And here in this city, in Auroville, India, they don't do that. And they talk about energy and bad moods. And bad moods are a thing. Energy is really not. I don't really believe there's some sort of an energy that runs the world, especially when they can't quantify it or talk about it. But on the positive side, they are very green. They do a lot with local shops. They work very close within themselves. They reuse all sorts of things from feminine hygiene products to diapers. I didn't hear anything about condoms, so hopefully they don't reuse condoms, but you never know. And so they talk about how they're as green as they can be and how they reuse a lot of things, which if we look at Native American culture, they are the original green people. And maybe that's just a societal thing that we've lost due to convenience, but that makes sense. This community embraces this aspect. This community is creating a way to reduce their footprint that I don't think our whole world has picked up on yet.
Well, obviously, the green culture, the flower children, they basically had like a spiritual connection to the earth. They call it Gaia and Mother Earth and stuff. So naturally, they're going to have this, this tie into it, and that's one of the reasons why in certain cultures, when they have their religious connections to the earth itself, we do see more of a green understanding and a green expectation for the way people treat the earth and the culture. And so, for my question here is just what they're trying to do with this utopian society. Were they trying to create the perfect one? Because in the book that I mentioned, Walden 2, this was basically a psychology experiment. This is psychological control that B.F. Skinner proposed and basically what he expected if one was created in modern society. They would take complete isolation of all the new people, all the new populace in the society to completely get rid of as much bias as they could. Now, it's never going to be perfect because the structure itself, the way that everything is organized, the rules and stuff, those would be created by people in the old society. So you have the new society, and the new rules, and that's a separate, complete thing. It's like abiogenesis, but cell replication, right? It's a new cell, completely separate from the other, and there's no transition between the two. And then let's say that one creates another new one, another completely separate and unbiased as best as they can. And so the bias, the things that make modern society bad, they're lesser and lesser. And hopefully, as the philosophical ideals go on, it becomes the more pure future society they expect. It's kind of like the long-term evolution of perfect psychology.
Yeah.
Now, if these people were just like, we want to create a world where everybody gets to hang out and it gets to be green, but we can still have some of the amenities and the good things from modern society, then it sounds like they're sort of succeeding.
Well, they want a little bit of both. How about that? So it originated with somebody called Siri Auroville Biondies. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Sorry. And he's the one that was the actual visionary behind the logic behind this, right? And he didn't live forever. He lived to be 78 years old, but he had 5 dreams. And there was another individual called the Mother who actually tried to take these dreams and put them in perspective. So this is what the 5 dreams were. A revolutionary movement which was created to create a free and united India. The resurgence and liberation of the peoples of Asia and her return to her greater role in the progress of human civilization. Number 3, a world union forming the outer basis of a fair, brighter, and nobler life for all people. They wanted to also be, number 4, the spiritual gift to India, to the world. I don't agree with that one, but... And then number 5, which is the one that I can understand and agree with the most, is they want to take a step in evolution which would raise humans to a higher and larger consciousness and begin the solution of the problems which have perplexed and vexed since people first began to think and to dream of individual perfection and a perfect society. So they leave the collective open enough to allow for the transformation for some of the newer possibilities that could come and revolutionize life, but keep it contained enough to create a more humanistic world that we would live in. And that's the big thing here, Hannah, is so their goal here is not just to be this free-for-all society where everybody takes and takes and takes. Everybody should take what they bring in. And that's the whole point of this, is that they're able to create a society where if you get injured, your friend's going to take care of you, right? You're not going to worry about, well, I don't have the money, I'm not able to do this, and nobody else is going to do this, so we need the government to do this. The people have become a collective government. And I know that sounds kind of scary. It sounds very 19...
Sounds really democratic, man.
Well, I don't know about that. It sounds almost more than democratic, personally.
Well, pure democracy basically means that there is no representation. Everyone gets one vote and it's equal. There's no difference in anybody's vote. So there's no overriding veto, no Congress. It's just one person at a time.
Yes. And their goal was to create a moneyless society, and that did not happen. And I do think that's a big downfall for this. But they talk about, because the problem is you don't buy a house. You donate money for a house. That's what you do. You don't go, hey, this is mine. It becomes part of the community. It just happens to be the living stance that you are in, and nobody can kick you out of it. So if you and I wanted to go over and live over there, and we had, I think they talked about roughly like $48,000 to $50,000 you would have to donate for your house. Once you donated that money, that house became yours. But when you left, it's not yours. It goes back to the housing committee.
Yeah, so you're essentially like buying a license for the house?
Essentially, yes. Because in the end, that house belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
You're just taking ownership and caretakership of it for so many years.
So the money itself is kind of like you've worked this long, and now you've worked enough and gained enough credit so that you get to buy this house, or is this can be brought in from outside society?
You can bring this in from outside. You could walk in and pay for it, but they wouldn't just let you walk in and drop money and say, "Hey, you're part of the society." You would have to, do your due diligence and start to volunteer for different things. And so if you were able to come buy a house, you could probably come buy a house, get put on a list, and get, moved into these different areas. And then you would have different other restrictions that would allow them to basically evict your right to be here.
So you can't Ted Kaczynski it then and just hide inside of there and write your crazy manifesto.
Well, no, you probably, you might be able to, but you probably couldn't get away with it. I guess if you're rich enough, you might be able to get away with some of that, but at some point, they discourage that very heavily.
Well, they're probably going to make you work for your food. Like, you can't just buy something and just go in there. That's the idea of, the community or whatever, that you have to actually, add to the community in order to get the basic forms of necessity of life.
Yeah, some of the other stuff, and I don't want to spend, I don't want to keep everybody for 7 hours on this, but some of the stuff they talk about, so that money that you would pay for that house would go to a community fund. Now, I'll be honest, I think this article is very biased. It does not tell us where that money goes, and it doesn't seem to know or care to know, right? But this community gets a lot of government money. Auroville gets money. They also have private donations from people all over the world. So there's private donors, visitors that come here as tourists, and then you have, the stewards or the people, and then on top of that, you have the Indian government. So there's money to be had there. So the funny thing is, the largest criticism, they try to make this article out to be bad because you could get killed, murdered, there's no law, blah, 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 blah. But after they got into the article and you started reading some of it, it's just a stupid headline. The bigger concern is where does the money go and who controls the money? And, why is this so secret? And so, in all fairness, right, that is a concern that a lot of people have. That is a concern. But is it a concern because of the fact that that's what we're used to, right? We're used to saying, if I can produce $1 million of worth a year, I should get this amount. And if I'm worth this, look at Trump, right? He doesn't pay taxes for 20 years, he thinks his worth is more than what he should be able to donate to the federal government. And in here, I think some of the troubles become because of how we see society, and that we're not trustworthy of what's happening. Now, that doesn't mean they couldn't be more transparent. It doesn't mean that there's more things that they could do to make sure everybody knows exactly where the money's going, exactly how much money is actually had. There's a lot of things that they could do to create some of that, get rid of that mysticism, and the dysfunctional aspect that people think they have.
Definitely. Any kind of structure like this, if you really want to succeed, it has to be completely transparent. It has to be absolutely no way for someone to sneak and cheat and trick their way out. Like, anything you do, everyone has to be able to see. And that was the whole goal, right? That's the whole reason we have journalism in this country, at least we used to, when they really did real journalistic integrity and investigation and stuff like that, is that they kept check on the people who were making the major decisions. And if they weren't doing the right thing, the rest of the people said, no, you're not doing the right thing. We're going to change who's doing this. And that was the whole idea of society and journalism and keeping things in check. So if this utopian structure doesn't have some kind of checks and balances where they say, okay, if this person is controlling this money for all of these houses, there is absolutely no way that they can just jam some in their pocket and go into town and get a drink. That kind of stuff has to be completely transparent. And if it gives at least a continued existence chance when it comes to the rest of society changing and potentially getting worse around it, because the way the future looks right now.
Yeah. And so at the end of the article, this is what they talk about. They talk about the issues because of the limited supply of water, right? An unsustainable economy, tangles of bureaucracy, which I don't disagree with exactly. They talked about secreted money, which we just talked about. That's a problem. And no record keeping. And I bet they have record keeping. They probably just don't produce it because they feel it would be against the greater good to be able to produce, say, hey, look, we have a wealth, but you don't get all of it, right? And, oh, yep, you paid that much for your house. We could have just donated it to you. So there is some bureaucratic issues, and there is human selfishness that comes into this. There is. But on the opposite side, they're run on solar panels. They talk about half the community of that whole community is run on solar panels. They talk about organic farming, which, again, I don't care about organic farming, but I do care about farming that is sustainable. They talk about spontaneous art and theater shows. They talk about free education. They talk about the private capacity to allocate space to further your own oneness, your own consciousness, your own ability to create ideas. That's the reality of this, right? And it's funny because this is how they close the article off, by talking to a bartender outside of the city. And basically the bartender says this. He says, this place, they're all looking to be cured. The ones who are cured, they leave. The rest are just stuck. And the guy who wrote the article goes, they're cured of what? And they say, well, that is the true question.
Oh, jeez.
And so the article, and I'll admit, the article is extremely slanted. And yes, you by walking into this community, you are giving up a lot of your life for the greater good. You're giving up a lot of your consciousness, a lot of your ability to own and maintain possessions. But if we look at a minimalistic environment and we created some sort of libraries and all these other infrastructures that allowed for us to obtain or have the same things that we would have, but as a collective community, why would it be that bad? Look at online music. You know, it took off because music was expensive. CDs were expensive. If we want to talk about renewal resources, in this community, musicians would thrive because they would be given the legitimacy to be able to go create their art. It would then turn around and allow them to publicize it on a national, broadcast forum to create money if they need to. And then internally, you'd be able to go, I really like these artists, therefore I'm able to listen to this for free because it's all stored at a main library. But now we're talking about socialism, right? Now we're talking about you not being able to drive change through, money, through currency, through the ability to produce something that you feel is worth the greater good, that people buy into, and then that's how you create your capital wealth. Or you're a bully like Trump.
I've said this for years, and as much as I really like this idea, it's like the same problem that came with Walden 2, is that there's no way for current society to basically perfectly join this stuff. That was the whole total overarching theme of the book, is in the end, the people in society now can never get into that perfect society. And so we have, you have the detriments and the good parts about this wonderful culture that's probably out there that's great for some people. And some people like me that would probably like something a little bit more in between. Like, I would love for our modern society to absolutely embrace a ton more of green energy and socialistic things where we take care of each other and you do this and you do that and we all put in and we do more barter and trade versus pure money and finance and capitalism. And then I would also like the basic structures of capitalism to continue to exist, provided we had, obviously a democratic socialist country that regulates and keeps people on an even keel, like the blend, the middle ground. Because I can't do a full-fledged revolutionary ideal. I can't do that ideology that intensely. And so the good things about this society, the things they've learned and the things that work, I would love to incorporate them into our society. But I also don't want to leave everything we have behind and become just essentially a nomadic or a fully green flowered power society. It doesn't really interest me. I love modern technology and intense technology and all kinds of stuff like that. I just love it to be more green. So if I could get in between both of these, that would be great. And so hopefully in the future, maybe we can learn something from what they've done that worked and what it didn't work.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made, transparency that can be made, and I do think we could blend a society a little bit better. And the best part about it is that not everybody, thinks the same way. Not everybody would thrive in the same environment. Not everybody would be able to get the exact same benefits out of this that others would. And I don't want to discourage communities like this because I think there are people out there that would benefit from this. And I do think if we took some of their principles and applied it, especially the green principle, and applied it, we would do it. But we all know money is what makes things move faster. We all know money and improvements and the ability to do that is what drives people at this point in our evolutionary process. And I'm going to disagree with you a little bit in that I think in true succession, if we could get rid of that stance, create the same effect through a more socialistic combine, we would be able to create a better society. and I think we'd be able to move faster. But, now I sound like, the guy that donates all his money to the CFI, what's his name, Robert, from that owns WPRR. And he's a huge socialist. Goodrich, Bob Goodrich. Great guy. You should look him up. Goodrich Theaters, everybody. But anyway, there's a taxing part to this where we have to acknowledge there are failures. We can't say this is the only way to go, the only way to get things, the only way we're going to succeed in life is through this. And so what we need to do is we need to take some of these principles, we need to take them, combine them with our capitalistic enterprise, get rid of some of these bureaucracies that are using politics to control us, and take it back with the power of the people. And maybe you'd say that's Bernie. Maybe you say that's Hillary. Maybe some of you think it's Trump. I don't. Hannah does. But our goal should be to create a better humanity, to benefit the most amount of lives and create the least amount of harm. And the only way I could think of doing that is to take some of these principles and apply them to our lives. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. We've hit episode 51, everybody, and we'll be back next week with more Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.